Yep, Matt. Thank you, Matt. All right, let's get started here. Super excited. Let me just get my stop share here. Okay. See all your beautiful faces. All right, let's get going. I'm super excited to have Kimberlee on today, and I see she's here. So Kimberlee, if you want to unmute yourself.
Yep. Thanks for having me. I love the music.
Yeah, absolutely. Get it rocking first thing in the morning, right?
Great.
So Kimberlee, thank you so much for coming on. For those of you of us who don't know who you are, and I know you hate talking about yourself, but if you could just give us a quick intro on who you are and what you're all about.
Yeah, so my name is Kimberlee Meserve. I'm an agent in Boston. I have a small team that I'm just starting to grow. And I actually moved, I've been in the business for 5 years now, only ever been with Keller Williams. That was, I guess, I call it luck, but maybe a little bit of it was fate. But I moved to Boston in 2018, so I didn't start my real estate career there. So when I moved there, I had no SOI, nothing. So I had to totally rebuild my business from scratch. And I've done that through doing first-time homebuyer events. So I saw the need for education around that, especially in our market. It's like our average price point is about, for a first-time buyer, is about 500,000 to 700,000, and a lot of people just see the price tag and they're like, I can't buy a house. And then when you do the math and you look at the monthly payment, it's really not that different from what they're paying rent, because we're the third most expensive rental market in the country. So I saw the need and the opportunity for a lot more education around that. And so since 2018, my lender partner and I have probably done over 100 events, and it's been a great pipeline and business building tool.
That's awesome. So you've been in the business 5 years, but then you moved to Boston in 2018. So you kind of had to like start over, right?
Yeah.
So where did you come from? Where were you living before?
I have a little bit of an interesting journey of how I got here. So I was in Southern Maine. That's where I'm originally from.
Okay.
And that's where I started out. I spent my first year, and this is something that I say to when people ask, like, what advice would you give to new agents?
Yeah.
I spent my first year just trying to figure out like what to do and how to do it. And I saw it's almost a blessing and a curse that we have so much wonderful training if someone doesn't know how to take that and apply it. So I saw all these agents doing different things. Oh, okay, I can door knock. Oh, I can call for sale by owners and expireds. And I was just all over the place. And I wish that someone had just said, pick something that you really enjoy and focus on being the best at that. And I think I would have found success a lot sooner had I done that. So I was in Southern Maine, and then in 2017, I moved to the North Shore of Boston to join a team there. And I was with them from November of 2017 until August or September of 2018. So they wanted to do expansion, and they wanted to do it on a more local level. So their first area was Boston, and they approached me and offered me the opportunity, which was a easy decision for me to make because all the friends that I had made in that short period of time were in Boston. So I moved. And then a month after I moved, I got a call that pretty much everybody on the team had quit.
Oh.
And so a month before I moved, so I moved in August and everything fell apart in September, but in July, my lender partner and I started doing the first time home buyer events because the main lead gen source for this team that I was on was a lot of pay-per-click ads, and those can take a little bit longer to come to fruition. So they were like, hey, we'll pay for leads for you, but you're also going to have to find some more immediate business. So we started doing them in July and had really good success. And so by the time September came around and everything happened with the team I was on, they were like, hey, both the admins are leaving, everybody except for like 2 agents were leaving. They're like, do you want to stay? And I was like, you know what? It really doesn't make sense for me. Everything I had for business at that time was stuff that I had generated on my own. And so since then, I've been just focusing on building my own business.
So you said something in there, you wish someone would have just told you to find what you like to do and do that. So for a new agent, how would you find what you like to do? What would you tell them, how to go down that path?
Yeah, I mean, I think it just depends on your personal interests. So anybody who's ever seen like Jason Abrams speak, he has this whole class that he teaches on it. It's like I don't remember the title, but it's like Love Your Life and Be Successful or something like that. And it's basically just like, what do you enjoy doing? If you I love educating people. Like that's a passion of mine. And so the first time homebuyer events was a natural progression of what I'm passionate about doing. But if you love playing tennis, go play tennis and just meet new people every time, invite someone new. It's just at the end of the day, real estate is just a relationship game. So find the most comfortable and natural way for you to get into relationship with as many people as possible.
Yeah, I like that. We've talked about that here in our market center too. Like, whatever it is you like to do, it doesn't have to be real estate related. Just get out there, meet people with similar interests, and that will lead to, oh, what do you do? Well, I'm in real estate. And then that's someone else that you add to your database, whether or not they're ready to buy today or sell today. They also might know someone or whatever, right? And then you add value to them. So I
Yeah.
want to talk. Oh,
Oh,
go
I just
ahead.
want to add a point about that. I think people tend to be so short-term focused in this business. Like, what's my next piece of business? And when you switch your mindset to being more like pipeline focused, your whole world changes. So going into this year, like since September of 2018, so we're 2 years now, the last 2 years, all of my focus has been is just building a pipeline and staying in relationship with people. So maybe someone would come to my event and they might not be ready for 6 to 12 months, but my goal is to just get into a relationship with them as soon as possible. And so going into this year, it made it so easy to set my goals because I knew what was in my pipeline. And I see agents in my office that I'm friends with that are doing pretty good production, but they're always like, where's my next piece of business coming from?
Yeah, you know, the tool in Command for the pipeline where you can kind of see everything on the dashboard's been huge. I know for a lot of our agents, just to kind of have that visual of what's coming next. But that's all, I think that's like a huge problem for a lot of agents, whether they're new or not, is that pipeline. So it starts with having the right activities that you're doing up front, which it sounds like for you is this first time home buyer events. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that because I think that'll hit well with some people here. So before COVID, and I've been kind of following you a little bit here, so I kind of know, but before COVID, how were you running those?
Yeah, so before COVID, they were in person at a local brewery. The reason that we decided to do that was I did a few events at my office, and we had like one day that it was really nice out in the spring. And in New England, it's just like the first nice spring day you get, everybody's just like, I want to be outside. And so nobody showed up to that event. And that was a big aha moment for me that, like, of course, no one's going to show up. I wouldn't want to go to a real estate office on a Sunday. Like, why? It's nice out. So, I spent a lot of time thinking, I'm like, where would people want to go, even if it's nice out, that it's just the right type of environment that regardless of the weather or whatnot, it's going to keep that crowd. So the brewery seemed like the right fit and it ended up being a big success, and it's been a good partnership up until COVID because we would bring a lot of business to them at a time where they are usually not very busy. People would stay, hang out afterwards. And it's just like a very laid back, non-intimidating environment. So when COVID hit, we had to switch because my whole goal for the year, I've been so intentional about tracking my numbers. I know how many people attend my events, what my conversion typically is. And my whole goal was based off of how many events I was going to do for the year. And that has been my one thing for the past few years. So I couldn't just abandon that. And so we just had to pivot to doing them virtually. So now it's just on Zoom. We still have similar attendance. Obviously, the environment's a little bit different, but I think at the same time, we're attracting some other people that maybe would feel intimidated showing up and sitting in a room full of strangers asking a question that they might think is dumb.
Yeah, I think home buyers in general have just a lot of questions, whether their first time or their 10th time, and to give them that opportunity to ask those questions is huge. And then, so I would imagine what this does is by giving them the platform to, meet you and ask questions, that you get your arm around them before another agent would have an opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. Gary says that 78% of buyers work with the first agent that they meet. So I've been really intentional about inserting myself into the process early as possible. So I'm not asking for anything from them. Like, I'm just starting the relationship by providing them with value and pouring into them. And I can't tell you how many people I, maybe have followed up with a bunch of times and they've been kind of quiet, haven't gotten back to me. And then something will change in their world and they'll reach out to me and say, hey, I saw this house. I think I'm ready to buy. I would really love for you to be my agent. Like, I don't even have to ask them for the business. They're asking me to represent them. And it's really just because I'm starting by pouring into them and providing them with value.
Yeah, that's a pretty high number of buyers who will work with the first agent, 78%. So if you guys are listening, you're taking notes, write that down. 78% of buyers work with the first agent they meet. So the goal should be to get in front of these buyers before anyone else really has the opportunity. And what Kimberlee's doing with these events is, I mean, number one, like, hey, if you're thinking about buying, come here. So let's talk specifics, Kimberlee, on what you're doing to drive traffic and get people to these events. I guess let's start with the people who are coming. Do you have any relationship with them before they show up to this event?
Typically not. I've over time, I've started to get, XYZ agent in another state says, my son lives in Boston. I would love for him to come to your events. So I've gotten some referrals that I've just funneled through that system because it's leverage for me when I'm just like, anybody that I meet that maybe is a first time buyer, it's a lot more efficient for me to have them attend the event than do the whole education piece before the consultation. But for the most part, it's people I don't know. So the way that we're driving traffic is through Facebook ads, targeting first time home buyers, and then we're sending them to an Eventbrite page to sign up. It's pretty simple. There's not a lot of rocket science to it. I haven't spent time doing advertising on other platforms. And then we're just connecting them with them beforehand to confirm that they're attending. And it's usually about 50%. So 50% of the people that register will attend. And we have follow-up plans for the people that don't attend. We're funneling them to future events too.
What kind of ads or ad spend are you doing on this?
Yeah, so it depends. There's no like set number. It really depends on what your reach is. So where I'm in a city of over close to 1 million people in our whole greater metro area, there's a lot of potential reach. So you want to base your ad spend off of what the potential reach is. So once you start funneling it down, maybe adding a few interests, I did spend some time also thinking about like, what does my ideal client look like? Like, what do they like to do? What do they do for jobs? Maybe that kind of stuff. And I've added some additional filtering there just because we have such a big reach. And so I think my target is about 40,000 people now. And so what you want to do is if your target is 40,000, you would spend about 400. If it's 20,000, you'd spend about 200. So it depends on those first three numbers.
Oh, that's a interesting way to do that. I like that. And then so let's talk about like if you spent $400, what would be a typical number of people who you would expect to show up?
Yeah, so we are about 25. It's been tougher to measure with Zoom because before we could have like, hey, there's physically two bodies here. It's hard to see how many people might be sharing a camera or whatnot, but we're about 20 to 25 people attend each time. And I have about actually the interesting thing that happened with COVID is my conversion rate went up from like 18% to 21%. On Zoom. So I don't know if it's just because it's easier to connect with people instead of them like running out to get another beer or whatever. But my conversion rate has gone up. So typically, I mean, I'm spending $400 to make $50,000 to $60,000 in commission.
And when you say your conversion rate is gone from 18 to 21, is that the conversion from the people who come to the meeting to turn into a client?
To becoming a client, correct.
Okay.
So it's about 50% registration to attendance and then 20% attendance to becoming a client.
Right. Okay. So of the, 20 people who show up on average, about 2 of those will become a client?
No, about like 4.
4 of those will become a client. Okay. Yeah. Gotcha. Okay. So I just want to kind of backtrack all this. So 4 of those, and then, Kimberlee's average, you said about 500,000 is your average price point?
Yeah, like 550.
Okay. So she's spending $400 to turn that investment turns into about 50 to 60,000 after the closings. Now here, and I'm talking to the room here, our average price point is not as high, although we are pushing close to 300, but even at a 200,000 price point, that's a $6,000 commission. And if you spent $400 to get 4 people to sign up as a buyer, that would be, what is that, for $800,000 in sales from one event, spending $400. So that's not a bad return at all. I mean, that's huge. You would, what is that, $24,000 in commissions. You would easily turn that, if someone said, hey, if I give you 400, or you give me 400 and I'll give you 24,000, you do it all day, every day. So
Yeah, I would do that 100 times over. Yeah,
yeah,
I think people get really lost. I mean, part of the problem is a lot of people aren't tracking their ROI.
yeah.
Then they get really lost in just looking at the dollar amount instead of what the return is going to be. And that's pretty much my lead gen spend for the year. Most of my business is about 70% first time home buyers. The other 25% is agent referrals, and then the rest is sphere of influence that I've built over these past few years. So when you spend $400, but you're doing, we'll probably do about 30 events this year. It's still like it makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, the dollars and cents. And so if you're sitting in the room saying, geez, it'd be nice, but I don't even have $400. I mean, you can start smaller. Instead of having 20 people show up, maybe you only have 2 or 3 show up. It's okay. You got to start somewhere. But this is a great way to just drive traffic, bring it to you, so that way you can turn it. And clearly it's working. So
well, here's the other thing. If you are sitting in the room and you're like, I'm a brand new agent, I really don't have that much money to put into my lead gen, go find partners, find a lender to split the cost with you. That's what my lender and I did for a very long time. So I would spend on the ads, and then we had to pay for the brewery space. So it was about $400. So it was pretty even. I would spend $400 on the ads. He would spend $400 on the brewery. And then now where we're just on Zoom, he'll just reimburse me every so often for the ad spend because he doesn't have any cost involved. And our costs overall have gone down because we were printing a booklet and all that kind of stuff. And we were paying for beer, everything there. So we don't have any costs involved in Zoom. So if you don't have much money to put into this, go find a lender partner who's going to be a great speaker, who is going to truly be a partner in this with you, because I couldn't do this without my lender. He helps me with a lot of the follow-up. We just have a really great relationship, and he has truly been a partner in helping me build my business.
So I'm a huge fan of the one thing, Kimberlee, like huge fan. So what would be the one thing that you would say or offer advice to everyone to get this started? Like, where do they start with this? What's step one?
Step one is just do it. The amount of questions that I get from agents, like, it's fascinating to me how bogged down people get in the details. They think that they have to do it the perfect day of the week. They have to do it the perfect time. Everything has to be perfect before they do it. Well, the whole reason that we do them on Sundays from 11:30 to 1 is because that was literally the cheapest time we could get at the brewery. It wasn't any type of strategic decision. We were like, all right, we only have so much money. This is the cheapest time. We'll take it. And so, obviously you're not going to go and do this like midweek at 9 o'clock in the morning when your target audience is working, but there is no like secret sauce to this. It's just do it. Like I haven't always had the success that I've had. Our first event was great. Our second event, I thought was a total tank. Like 4 people showed up, and had I not been tracking my numbers, I would have stopped then, except every single one of those people became my client. So I'd rather have an event that has 4 people, but everybody becomes my client, over an event where 30 people show up and I don't convert any of them.
Yeah. Gary Vaynerchuk talks about that. It's better to go deep than go wide. And if you can, hit these people, and especially like giving them more of that one-to-one experience with you, then you're more likely to convert them. What, if any, takeaway materials are you providing to the guests? Is there something they walk away with, or through Zoom that you'll email them out so they have like that
Yeah,
tangible?
so we have a booklet that's a workbook where there's a lot of fill in the blank stuff. They can take their notes, and we used to print that out and like give it to them at the event, but now we're just emailing it as a PDF.
Okay. And then when you were doing it in person, are you providing the food, or they get all that on their own?
We were giving people drink tickets to get a
Drink,
beer,
okay.
and then there's an on-site vendor for food, but we weren't providing food.
And you said that these last about 90 minutes?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. I want to kind of shift gears with you. When we were chatting about bringing you on, we were talking about what we wanted to kind of go over, what I wanted to go over with you. And one of the things that you said is like finding your one thing. And I think that's again, back to the one thing. I'm a huge fan of it. It's here on my desk. I read it almost every day. I think that's important for a lot of the agents. And I feel like looking back, and I've been in the business 16, 17 years, we tend to go to shiny objects, right? And like, what's the next thing that we can do that we can implement into our business that's going to bring us all of the clients, instead of just like focusing on that one thing and doing that one thing. So on a day-to-day basis, Kimberlee, what is the one thing that you do that you find that is really driving this success? Because you've had a great amount of success in a short amount of time.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I didn't have a lot of success for a while. And I think, like Gary said it best at Mega Camp, is you just have to like accept the boredom involved in mastery. And at a certain point, like in 2019, I started out the year kind of all over the place. I was approached to about a few different TL positions, and I was like, maybe I'm going to go do this, maybe I'm going to do that. And finally, my coach was like, okay, like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Nothing against being a TL, Rob. But that just wasn't the path that I was on. And there was an episode of the One Thing podcast, and I don't know off the top of my head which episode it is, but they talk about the way that the GPS truly works is that you don't earn the right to move on to priority number 2 until you've really mastered priority number 1. And theoretically, each of your 3 priorities, when done alone, should lead you to 100% of your goal. So if you are able to execute all 3 priorities at 100%, you're now going to hit 300% of your goal. And I think it doesn't get talked about enough. It gets overlooked a lot. And so there were a lot of times where I would get bored in that like mastery, and I'd be like, okay, like I'd have a conversation with my coach and I'd be like, okay, I think I'm ready to like move on to number 2. And she's like, are you really, like, have you really mastered this? And it forced me to constantly go back and reevaluate, okay, where's the opportunity here for me to make this better, to improve? So like what I'm doing today for first time homebuyer events is not what I was doing in the beginning. And that's where I was saying, like, just get started. Like it's going to evolve over time. And I've added things over time and it's changed. But that's just because it's been my one thing that I focused on mastering. So on a day-to-day basis, honestly, I'm an introvert, even though like it doesn't, I think people get introvert and extrovert confused a lot. It's not if you're outgoing or not, it's where you get your energy from. And for me, like I get a lot of people coming at me on a daily basis, and that is very, very draining for me. And so I could be someone that gets on the phone every day for 3 hours in like cold calls, but I would be extremely unhappy. And I know that about myself. And so these events have actually been a way for me to leverage my energy, because I would rather spend an hour and a half once a week in front of 30 people and just kind of focus everybody in one place at once, then I'm not doing it 30 different times. And so for like a day-to-day basis, a lot of what I'm focusing on is really just following up with people that are in my pipeline and then focusing on growing my team members. So this year, I kind of made the decision to start growing a team, and my joy in this business has changed a lot from like loving the wins and getting a new client to loving seeing the people around me that I'm talking with every day grow in their personal goals.
I love hearing that, Kimberlee, because I'm very similar. In fact, when Mega Camp couldn't happen in person, I was a little sad, right? Because I like to travel and go to Austin and see people that I don't get to normally see in real life. But I was also kind of relieved because then at the end of the day, I can go home to my own bed and just relax because I need that, like that time, right? And so I'm similar in that aspect. Couple things that I pulled out from what you just said. First thing is a coach. So I'm a huge believer in coaches. I've had coaches almost my whole entire career, and it's been a huge impact on my business. It's a huge impact on my business now as a team leader. What does that relationship with your coach look like? Because and I was also a productivity coach here in the Market Center. And I used to get some people like, they didn't really want to hear what they needed to hear. So it created conflict. How does that relationship work with your coach?
Well, I, like you, have many coaches. So I have my business coach, I have a fitness coach, I have a health coach. Like, I've got coaches for everything. I think you have to, if you're not ready for coaching, like, just don't waste your money. You have to be someone that's willing to just let go and accept that you aren't going to see all your blind spots, and that's what a coach is there for. But if you're not willing to listen and you're not willing to accept that you're not perfect, don't waste your money. My coach has been amazing. Like, she I call her my real estate mom. She's so wonderful. So I started coaching with her in August of 2018, or July, August. And my coach is a little bit untraditional. So she is a like a production coach, like in MAPS, business coach, I guess is the term, but she is trained in some of the transformational stuff as well. And I think the first like 9 months that we coached together, all we did was talk about personal stuff. And there was a lot that I needed to work through before I could really focus on my business. And so that was amazing for my personal growth. And now it varies. Like, we're kind of all over the place. Sometimes we'll just talk numbers. Sometimes, hey, what's going on? Are you having difficulty with this person on your team? How are we going to handle that challenge? She's been amazing.
That's awesome. I love that you listen to the One Thing podcast. It's one of my favorites. I really like and respect Jeff Woods and what he's been able to do with that business, and that you use a GPS. So that story that you kind of shared about you have to master the first thing in order to earn the right to. I love when Jeff tells that story when he's sitting there with Gary and Gary rips the sheet of paper, right? So if you guys haven't heard that, it's on the One Thing podcast. You all should be listening to it. It's amazing. But so I clearly use a GPS. Are you also using a 411, Kimberlee?
I was for a while. I've gotten away from it. I recognize it's something I need to get back into my life, especially because I hold all my teammates accountable to a 411. So we have weekly 411 meetings, and that's been so gratifying for me, seeing them hit their goals and focus on their personal growth. I think it's interesting. I was just listening to the Win Make Give podcast, and Ben just did an episode about his whole road trip last summer and turning right. And I'm actually on vacation right now because I had a very similar moment last week of realizing, like, oh my God, like I was like in total burnout mode. And I just needed to get away. And part of that is because I haven't been putting that white space on my calendar, and I've been so focused on everybody else and not what my true priority is. And your priority isn't always necessarily like, what are your business goals? Sometimes it's like personal growth. It's other things in your life. And so, yeah, I need to get back to using a 411.
Well, this is a little coaching call for you here then, I guess. I want to talk about your GPS. I think that that's a struggle for a lot of people to create one, number one, and then to follow it. So can you maybe just give us talk a few minutes around creating maybe that first priority, and then when you're putting those strategies underneath it, what kind of drives your mindset? And obviously everybody's GPS is different and it's for different goals, but just kind of like the 30,000 foot view on creating that. So if someone's sitting here saying, I don't even know where to start with that, and or I've done that before and I just don't get it, right? Like what's that?
Well, the GPS, I think a lot of people think that it's like set in stone. it's a living, breathing document. I've been working on mine since August, and it's not fully completed yet because I keep going back and saying, oh, maybe I want to do this, maybe I want to do that. I used to start with a goal in mind of like, what was my end goal for the year? And now I've kind of reversed that to, and this isn't necessarily the correct way to do it. It's really only going to work if you know what your numbers are, but I've reversed it to how many like of these specific activities do I want to do, knowing what each activity yields me as a result. And then I add it up cumulatively to my goal. But I would say like, if you're in the position of like, never done a GPS, or maybe you've struggled with it, figure out what your goal is, because if you don't know where you're going, how are you going to know when you get there? That's the most important part. And then work back from there, like what activities are going to yield that result, and just focus on one thing. Like maybe your GPS is just, instead of a 135, it's just a 1 for the first, or a 1 1 1, I guess would be the term. Like what is, say you want to sell 30 houses, like what is the one thing that you can do, and get really specific. A lot of people forget about, specific, measurable. Like you want to set SMART goals. So when I'm setting my goals, it's like, I'm going to do this amount of events, this many attendees, this is going to be my conversion rate, I'm going to get this many buyers, and calculating some fallout there too will yield me this many transactions.
Yeah. So what I'm picking up from this is like, don't overthink it, right? Just, and kind of what you said earlier about the events, just do it. So figure out what is that one thing, and then write it down, and then let's execute on that. And then I would assume, since you have coaches, that you're going over your GPS with your coach on somewhat of a regular basis to make sure you're staying on track, and then allowing the coach to kind of find, like you said, those blind spots and say, hey, what about this? What about this? So that way you can pivot if you need to. Would that be fair?
Yeah. So if you can't tell, I'm a very high D. Just do it. But it should translate to your calendar at the end of the day. So if I'm sitting down and I'm saying, okay, I'm going to do this many events, well, then they go into my calendar, and there's no, you almost want to just like make it easy for yourself. Like there shouldn't be any question about have I done it, because it's already in my calendar and I just go ahead and I book it. Like it should be the same with vacations, that kind of stuff. Like Gary says, put them in your calendar first. So I'm putting my vacations in my calendar, I'm putting my events in my calendar, and then the rest kind of just falls into place.
Yeah. So it's the, back to bold, which is, it's not about selling real estate, it's about following a schedule. And if it's not your calendar, it doesn't exist. And when you follow these like simple rules of if you put it in your calendar, then there's no option, right? And if someone says, hey, Kimberlee, you can look at your calendar and say, no, I can't, because you've got something else happening. And then your business is constantly moving forward. And I think beyond that, your big rocks of your personal life, your health, your mental well-being. I mean, like you said, you were on that burnout road, and now you're on vacation, which is like, I got to get away.
Yeah, I think, because we're in some of the same like group chats, and me and someone else were just like,
Yeah. And, I mean, truth be told, I just got back. I mean, I went away Thursday, Friday, Saturday, because I had to do the same thing. I mean, you've got to have that mental reset. And yeah, I know you and there was someone else from that group that said, yeah, I mean, they're in the same boat, so they went on vacation. But, again, that burnout happens, and then it's natural and it's okay, because you are grinding the rest of the time. So that's why you got to plug in those resets, and identifying when those resets are almost get ahead of them. Right? Like if I grind out this long that I need a reset, then you can schedule it kind of ahead of time and be proactive instead of reactive with it.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people underestimate the power of like thinking time. Like my biggest takeaway from this trip that I'm on is that I need to actually put thinking time in my calendar, and it's going to be an immovable object. If somebody asks us if I'm free during that time, I'm not. That's going to be my thinking time. Because sometimes, like a lot of times I struggle personally with figuring out the answers if my mind isn't calm and still. But when I'm able to just calm my mind and have that thinking time, a lot of the answers come from within. Like I have it in me already. It's just I'm too focused on other people's priorities or things that people need me to do, that I'm not taking the time to really calm myself, calm my mind, and get clear on things.
Right. Yeah. No, I like that. A lot of times when I'm coaching agents or consulting, I should say, is we plan out their schedule and then we put that white space in there for them. I mean, even just to take a mental break in the middle of the day and not think about anything, just breathe, is super important. So, so Kimberlee, what's next for Kimberlee and your team?
Don't ask me that. That is something that I'm actually getting clarity on right now. So I did, I've had it interesting like last few months. So I hired an assistant in just to give you guys like, this has kind of been my slightly off model trajectory, but I started out always having a TC because when I moved to a new state, I was like, I don't want to learn how to do this process. Like, I'm just going to leverage it out from the get-go. And that person is just, they get paid contract to close. If it doesn't close, they don't get paid. So that's been it. That was a very easy decision for me to make. And so that was kind of my first, like, so to speak, hire other than a coach. And then because I am so buyer heavy in my business, I got to a point where I was just showing houses so much, attending inspections. Inspections would happen in the morning and that would cut into my lead gen time. So I hired a showing assistant and she's been amazing. So she was kind of my second person. And then in August, I hired a admin and she ended up not working out. And so we hit the 30-day mark and I made it very clear with her, my expectations from the beginning. At 30 days, we're going to have a meeting. If you haven't done X, Y, and Z, we're not going to be in business together. And so, like Gary says, slow to hire, quick to fire. I had to fire her. And so I'm in the process of looking for a replacement. Meanwhile, I had brought on one of my past clients who is just so wonderful. He went and got his license and he was like, I want to work with you. And I was like, yeah, whatever. Okay, fine. And then I'm like, go get your license and we'll talk. And then he gets his license right away. And he's like, okay, like I want to come work with you. And I'm like, all right, I guess so. But he's been so great. And it's been really fun to see him just absolutely crush it. Like, he's like, oh man, like I didn't get a client until like my second week. And I'm like, wait, you don't understand. It took me 5 months to have my first closing when I first got in the business. And like yesterday, he's like, hey, I put 2 offers in. I'm like, this is amazing. You're like only 30 days in. And he has like 10 active clients, and he's like putting offers in. So that's fun. I think for me, it's just figuring out like what really fulfills me at the end of the day, what is going to keep this fun for me, because I realized how much getting into business with the wrong people can ruin the fun in this really quickly. And so I'm kind of just approaching it with like, I'm only going to grow at the pace that it's fun. Like I don't need a team of 30 agents, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, if those 30 people all have bad attitudes, I'd rather just be a solo agent and have a higher profit margin. So it's really just going to depend on getting into business with the right people, I guess.
Yeah, Gary talks about that all the time too, right? Is the right people, and I think, you know, especially for you and for a lot of people, we see a lot of these big teams get up on stage at the conventions, and it's kind of, you know, easy to get caught up in that. And when you see their big numbers, like, wow, that would be amazing to do that. And then when you start building that, it's not actually what it is on the stage. There's so much behind the scenes, and the turnover and the burnout and constantly managing all that, where if you just scaled it down and said, okay, now I'm having fun and I'm still active with clients, which is what really gets you into the business to begin with, then things just become easier as that lead agent, I guess. So it's a great lesson to understand that, you know, early on.
Yeah, I would say, like, to piggyback on that, this is a big mistake and aha that I've kind of had in my life in the last few weeks. When I got into the business 5 years ago, I was like, wow, I want to be just like those people on stage. Like, they must have amazing lives. And I've had like this whole aha being on this vacation, that it's everything I've done has just been straight lining my way to success, like point A to point B as quick as possible. And I was walking down this path at this place that I'm at right now the other day, and I'm like, man, this path is so inefficient. Like if they had just put it over there, it'd be so much more direct. And then I was like, wait a minute, that's not the point. Like it's not the point to get from this building to that building as quick as possible. The point is to enjoy the experience of walking down the path and like looking at the sights and the like beautiful nature. And it was a light bulb moment for me of realizing that like I've been so focused on just straight lining my way to success. And when I was like on stage at Mega Camp, it was a really weird experience for me because a lot of people were reaching out to me saying like, oh my gosh, you're so successful. I'm so impressed by the success you've had. And I don't feel any different. Like my life isn't better or worse. I don't feel like a failure, but like, I wouldn't like wake up and look in the mirror and be like, wow, I'm so successful. And so I would say like, if your goal is just based on looking at what other people are doing and saying like, wow, I want that because that person looks like they're crushing it, then reevaluate what's really important to you about that.
I love that. I love that story about the path. That's great. I'm going to likely use that. So I'll always give you credit though. All right, I'm going to open it. I could talk for hours to people, so I'm going to open it up. We've got 15 minutes left with Kimberlee. If you've got questions, go ahead and unmute yourself and you can ask them or put them in the chat. And we do have one in the chat. How do you come across the right people, like the guy who got his license or just got his license?
Yeah. So when you start to produce results, people pay attention. That's been a weird thing for me to realize. Like people want to get into business with you. And then it's just getting really clear on who gets to get into business with you. Because I've had a lot of people reach out, hey, I want to join your team. And I don't know them, but they see me posting on Facebook or they see me posting on Instagram or whatnot, or they saw me on, I had probably like 3 people reach out to me after Mega Camp saying like, hey, I want to join your team. So people kind of come to you when you're successful and they gravitate towards that. So you really want to make sure that you're clear on like what kind of people you enjoy being around. Don't just let anybody get into your world because you worked so hard to get there in the first place. One bad apple can really ruin the whole bunch. And so for Alex, I took him through the process with the KPA, and I was like really clear about expectations up front. And I was like, hey, I respect you so much. I absolutely loved working with you and your fiance in your transaction. You guys, I would consider you friends. Like you're such a pleasure to be around, but I really want to make sure that if we're going to get into business, it's going to be right. Like we're going to go through this whole process. And if it's not a fit, I'm not going to get into business with you because I don't want to ruin that relationship. So we already had that personal relationship, and it felt to me that like the stakes were a little bit higher because I didn't want something to kind of go sideways and then we're not friends anymore. And so I took him through the whole KPA process, and I was really rigorous about it. I've made the mistake in the past of skipping steps, really not doing my due diligence. But because I felt like the stakes were a little bit higher with that relationship, I was very rigorous about it. And then we got to the group interview, and like everybody was like, he just blew us out of the water. Like he came so prepared. He had researched everybody ahead of time that was on the group interview and asked them questions. And they were just like, wow, like you need to hire him. It's been cool too, because his role as a buyer's agent, even though I still work with buyers, my goal is to transition out of some of that in the next year and focus more on listings.
Yeah.
And it's so rewarding when you teach someone your systems and then you watch them do it better than you ever have done it yourself. That's been my favorite part.
Yeah, I like that you're using the KPA and establishing those expectations. One thing I would add, and absolutely what it is when you're succeeding and people see that success, they will be attracted to it, right? So when people are attracted to what you're doing, that's like the first step in hiring, because they're attracted to whatever it is that you've done or put out there. So that's probably a good step one. Using that KPA, for those of you guys who don't know what that is, Keller Personality Assessment. We have access to that here. We have a subscription we pay for as the Market Center, and we're happy to send those out and help you with that. Expectations. And then also I would encourage everyone to have a mission, vision, values, belief, and perspective for your own personal business. I share that with agents before we hire them into our Market Center of what the Keller Williams MVVVP is. And if they don't like anything on there, then we have a discussion around it. And sometimes it's something we can't get over. But you don't want someone entering your organization that you've worked so hard to build who doesn't align with your values and everything. So I love that that's where you're going with that. Matt, did you have some questions that you wanted to ask?
Hey, appreciate the joining us while you're on vacation. A couple questions about the events that you do. I heard your discussion at Mega Camp where you went into this a little bit more detail, but for those that didn't, I'm curious, do you have, or did you build like a page, like a dedicated page, like an educational page on your website, or are these standalone things that you do when you're doing these events? And then I have a second part question for the follow-up.
Yeah, so I would say that's an opportunity. So we've been kind of assessing, like, we've kind of plateaued in the numbers that we're getting. And part of that is just looking at, okay, where's our opportunity to improve? And I think building a page on our website is something that we certainly could be doing. What I did is I actually created a separate Facebook page, separate from my street property team at Keller Williams Facebook page. And it's just my event name. So we call it Brews and Buying First Time Home Buyer Event. So I created a Facebook page, and that way it looks a little bit more approachable to people. They're seeing it and they're like, oh, this is just a first time homebuyer event. It's not like, oh, this is a realtor. Like it's a different mindset for them. And so we've created its own entity, but there's opportunity for us to be creating content and all that kind of stuff around it. We just haven't focused our efforts there. And that's something we're going to be doing. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. So how did you, what was your main force? So I'm just picturing a Facebook ad, right? And then someone clicks on it. Where do they go to get more information or to RSVP?
So they click on it, sign up, and it brings them to Eventbrite. So
okay. Awesome.
I have an Eventbrite page. It's got information about the event. And then I've also included some testimonials from past clients that have attended.
Awesome. So the second part was the follow-up. So I'm assuming that the people that come register, or you verify them at the door or whatever to get a ticket. What is your follow-up plan? Because I think this is the biggest place that a lot of agents fall short. I know I do, is this follow-up. So is it, do you have a Brews and Buying smart plan? Is it just personal phone calls? You know, how do you ensure that those people don't fall through the cracks?
Yeah, follow-up has been a big opportunity for me as well. It was fascinating. When I hired Alex on, I was like, okay, I'm going to go through my whole database and like look at who, because I knew I had like over 1,000 people, but I was not in conversation directly with 1,000 people. So I went through everybody and I'm like, oh my God, there's so many people that I followed up with like once or twice and then never talked to them again. So that's, I mean, I'm far from perfect at that, but we've built out some smart plans. They're really just like anybody that's seen like a 10 days of pain for a buyer. It's pretty much just that. It's just more like, hey, thanks for attending our event, instead of like, hey, I saw you registered on my website and you were looking at properties. It's just, we've just switched some of the language around that. But essentially it's a 10 days of pain plan. But we're setting, like during the event, we're setting the expectation in their mind that we are going to be following up with them. So you don't want to just be doing the event and just saying, okay, great, that's all we have for you. You want to be setting in their mind that like, this is the next step. Then you do this. So like one thing we're saying is like, okay, anybody that's within 12 months of buying, we definitely recommend that you set up a time to talk with us so that we can get you started on property alerts. You might not be ready to go out and start looking at properties and putting offers in, but you're going to start seeing what's coming on the market, what things are selling for. And then by the time you are ready to buy, you're now going to be one of the most educated buyers out there. So we're setting the expectation that they need to meet with us, even if they're in 12 months. Like I've had some buyers that it took them 2 years to buy, but because I set that expectation, I was able to stay in relationship with them for that whole period of time. And it paid off because it was a great commission. And so we're like putting those little bugs in throughout the event. And then at the end, we're like, hey, okay, I've left a couple documents out that we go over during the event. And so that's another opportunity for me to follow up with them. So we'll say like, hey, you didn't get this ahead of time. We're going to be sending a follow-up email with our contact information as well as these documents. So we send that email after. And then we're just reaching out to everybody. Hey, did you want to get started on a preliminary search? So we're not saying like, do you want to get set up a buyer consultation? We're just saying, do you want to get started on a preliminary search? And that opens the door to conversation. If they say yes, awesome. Like, what are you thinking for a timeline? Where are you thinking of looking? Great. It would make sense for us to set up a time to talk so we can get really specific about what you're looking for, and then we're directing them to the buyer consultation.
Awesome. Good stuff. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I mean, follow-up is key on everything we do, guys, right? So having the follow-up, I really like that you're not giving them everything and then you'll come back with like, oh, we didn't send you this. So that way it's keeping them engaged too and letting them know we're going to send this to you, so you can expect that they're expecting it, so they're more likely to open it at that time too, right?
Yeah, and one of the things, this was my very first coach, who is not my coach that I have right now, actually gave me this idea. One of the things that we're sending is, it used to be the last page in our booklet when we had them printed, but it's a separate PDF, and it's a 2-page document on questions to ask an agent. So we talk about this during the event. And what I say is like, I would love to work with all of you, but should you choose not to work with me, it's really important that you do your homework and interview your agent. We're actually going to send you, because they're in our whole booklet, it says see questions to ask an agent. I'm like, you guys haven't gotten this, but we'll send it to you afterwards. Make sure that you're doing your due diligence. And the whole 2-pager it's just questions like, are you full-time versus part-time? And every single answer is meant to make us look better. So like, how many offers on things that consumers wouldn't think of, like how many offers is it going to take before I get something accepted? Like, that's a huge deal. And so we talk about like, this is the area average, this is our average.
Yeah, I mean, that is like that ninja type selling, right? Where you're putting these, and I don't know, you guys, if you've seen them, for sale by owner, like a packet or pamphlet is popular for doing that. Questions to ask a realtor before you hire them. And they're questions that like you're telling them, ask me these questions, and you've already got an answer. Whereas the average agent has no answer for it, or it's just not going to be as polished because they're not ready for it. So I love that idea too. One of the things I want everyone listening here is this is recorded and it will go on our YouTube channel. Go back and listen. Kimberlee's scripts, she's saying them, right? And it doesn't seem like she's like, here's the script I'm using. She's just saying it because she practices it and she says it a lot. Go back and get these scripts, write them down and practice them. They're excellent for conversion. So get those. All right, we got a few minutes left. If anyone has a last minute question, go ahead. And Megan?
Yep, I'll jump in.
Yeah.
So I can relate to you just liking to be like an educator. That's something I've done in previous jobs I've had. I'm new to real estate and just wrapping up my first year. So these first time home buyer seminars are something intriguing to me. But like in my mind, I'm like, I'm only in my first year. Am I actually qualified to be, hosting one of these? So I'm curious, when you first started, did you ever partner up with like a senior agent, or did you just jump right in by yourself?
I just jumped right in. You are an experienced agent. You need to change your mindset around that. If you're a year in, congrats, you've already made it farther than a lot of people. And if there's something that you don't feel like take a minute and just feel like, write down, what am I hesitant about? Is there something I feel like I'm going to get a question and I don't know the answer to? And like, write all those down and then ask someone else in your market center. But honestly, like, I moved to a new market where I didn't even really know the market, and I just jumped in and did it, and it's kind of like fake it till you make it. Obviously, if you don't know the answer, don't lie, but just do it. You're going to get better over time.
Okay. So it's kind of like role play
yeah, exactly. And what we pretty much, my lender partner and I wrote down all the questions that a buyer might potentially ask. Like, and it's everything from like, what does my credit score need to be? Like, what happens if this? I can predict every single question that someone's going to ask, because it's just, we commonly get the same questions. So just take some time and put thought into like, what are questions that buyers have? Ask another agent. If you have an agent in your office that maybe does a lot of buyer sales, hey, what are the most common questions that you get from buyers?
Thank you.
Great question, Megan.
I have a question.
Yeah, TNG.
Hi, Kimberlee.
Hi.
I'm TNG, and my question is, if your price point is around 550,000, to me, I would not even think that that market would require first-time home buyer seminars. To me, at that price point now, maybe that's the price point. That's an average for where you are. But being in Michigan at 550, to me, that's someone who's a second or third time buyer in that price range. So is that 550, or is that a first time buyer price point range in your area?
Yeah, my average price point is much lower than agents in my office. I think for our office, it's about 800 to 900 is the average price point. So 550, I mean, I would say the range is my clients probably spend 4 to 7, kind of that range. And that was a huge eye opener for me. My first house that I bought was $250,000 in Southern Maine. And I was like, this is so much money. And when I moved to Boston, I was like, people are spending $700,000 on their first place, but that's what we're dealing with. And because it's actually, we've added almost like another layer of hesitation and objections around buying because it is such a big number. Like, people are intimidated and they think that they can't afford to buy a house. And so a lot of our education is, hey, these are the programs, low down payment, your monthly payment is probably going to be around what you're paying for rent already. But like, when you're getting them in the mindset of, this is an example I always use, is if you're spending $2,000 a month in rent, which is very low for our area, and you live in your house for 2 years, when you move out, your landlord isn't writing you a check for $48,000. So why wouldn't you instead put that money into a mortgage where you're going to get that out when you go to sell?
Yeah, I think, being here, our average price point for our market center is right around 280. So in the city that our market center is located, we have housing from 100,000 up to over 2 million. So it's a wide range here. So when we hear these average price points, like, that seems insane that anyone could even afford a house at 550, 600 as a first time buyer. But it's all about cost of living, right? In areas like Manhattan, you're spending $1 million for like a studio apartment. So it just kind of, it's all relative, but it definitely is like sticker shock when it's like, oh, your average price point is 550. That's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, if sometimes I'm like, man, if I lived somewhere that it was cheaper, I could do double the sales, because it's just one less objection of people feeling like they can't afford it. Like,
yeah.
If there were $100,000 houses in my area, I'd be selling 100 of them.
Right. Awesome. Hey, it is 10:30. Our time is up, Kimberlee, but thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking time, especially on vacation, to come and chat with us. So if there's anything I can ever do for you, just feel free to reach out, and I'm sure you will. And thanks everyone for joining us. Have a great day.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.